Yes, welcome into Sports Bit. Betting Inside today. Happy New Year out there. Monday, January 2nd. Deep dive. We'll recap the semifinals and the weekend bowl action. Early look at the championship game. It's a rematch. Big game breakdown. Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, and the Charlotte-Chicago NBA game. Problems in Chi-Town. No surprise there. We always start on a Monday. Recap what happened in the NFL. Oh boy, where's the moose? The Falcons on cruise control. You want to talk about a backdoor? The Saints go wild in the fourth quarter, Teddy.
Yeah, and they go on. Of course, it's one of those situations where the favorite is so comfortably in control. The announcer's like, why is Matt Ryan still in the game? And then all of a sudden, the Saints score a touchdown, and then the Saints score another touchdown. And we don't have a lot of bad beat stories or a lot of moose stories without an onside kick recovery. And, of course, that's what was a story here. And a tired defense doesn't get less tired after allowing a touchdown and then having to go back on the field. So the Saints, with the 3 fourth quarter touchdowns, a dead team coming back to life. 2 of the last 3 TDs in the final 3 minutes of the ball game. But, to be honest, it was an even worse beat overall for the bookmakers around the world. We'll get into that one in a moment. Matt Ryan and Drew Brees ruined the day for a bunch of guys behind the counter.
Several bad bets. Let's start with the Ravens. Plus 2.5 to minus 2.5. They were saying the right things before the game. He thought they'd send out Steve Smith a winner. Reports came out that they could fire Morningweg his own C. But I thought the Ravens would show up. They didn't. It was the Bengals who played a strong game.
Yeah, and there was a ton of Baltimore money. This was a wise guy special on Sunday. The Ravens were bet from plus 2.5 to minus 2.5, and it was wrong. Flat out wrong. The Ravens played like a team that got eliminated from the playoffs last week, heading on the road against a divisional foe.
The Redskins went up to 9.5. All they had to do was win, and they were in. Horrible showing at home against the G-men.
Yeah, and again, we say this all the time. When a team gets bet up to 9.5 before kickoff, it doesn't matter. Must win doesn't ever mean will win, and it doesn't mean ever will win by margin. And a fitting end for Kirk Cousins. He's thrown a lot of bad throws. Cousins is going to get paid next year. Someone's going to pay him if Washington doesn't. But his interception to close out that game was, typical of what's happened this season for Washington. They lost a lot of winnable games. That's why they'll be out of the postseason looking in.
Yes, bad for the books. Nobody bet the Bills. How about the special teams touchdown on the kickoff where they run away from the ball and the Jets say thank you and jump on it in the end zone?
Yeah, the game was decided well before that play. But, when you say nobody bet the Bills, nobody bet the Bills. It was all Jets money. And the Jets obviously wire-to-wire job in that ball game. And Buffalo, much like Baltimore, played like a team that just got eliminated from the playoffs last week, heading on the road against a divisional foe. Flat, Bills. Jets, I'm not going to say a redemption, but at least a smile at the end of their season. But that was a bad result for the house. Nothing but New York Jets money.
And the Eagles get there, so a lot of Eagles money as well. Romo came in and threw a touchdown pass. Not enough, though, because the Sanchez got involved.
Oh, my God, and he was just awful. And it was nothing but Philly money. Eagles bet from minus 4, 4.5, all the way up to 6.5. Or even some 7s out there at kickoff. And the Cowboy bettors, they made him sweat early. But if you watch Sanchez out there in the second half, that hot start wasn't going to matter. Philadelphia looked flat early, didn't matter. When Mark Sanchez gets in the game, that team's not likely to cover, and that was the case for the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday. Bad result for the books.
Bad for the books continues. Couple of totals. Vikings, Bears over, and the shootout of the year, at least when you look at this total, what it was at. Highest total of the year, Saints and Falcons.
Yeah, let's talk about that Vikings-Bears. there was a ton of over money in that ballgame. That was bet from 40 all the way up to 44. And they had 34 at halftime. It was supposed to be a breeze. Then all of a sudden it's a scoreless third quarter, and it looks like Chicago's going to punt from their own territory. This game could easily stay under, but they went for it. Down 2 touchdowns from their own 40. They got stuffed. That equals a short field. That equals a cheap touchdown. And then, of course, the game ends up going over on a fumble 6. And flash this graphic. You got to put this up there about the highest total of the NFL this season. The Saints, Falcons bet from 55.5 up to 58.5. Look at that graphic. Atlanta in the first half against New Orleans. They did punt once this year. The other 10 drives against the Saints defense from the Falcons, all touchdowns.
The horrible job by the coaches here. How the hell do you have overtime in Week 17 when the game means nothing? Someone has to go for 2 at some point late in the game. In any event, who opened 12.5 with Pittsburgh?
Chris, offshore bookmaker opened 12.5. That game opened. That game actually went as low as 2.5 at Westgate, and then got bet back up. It ends up being a terrible result for any book that moved off to 3. But by and large, when you talk about the Steelers and the Browns, I mean, this was wise guys gorging at the trough, an all-you-can-eat buffet on Cleveland, with Pittsburgh not playing starters, not caring about winning or losing. The Browns played as well as they could, of course.
I don't know why. That was stupid. Get the number 1 pick. Get out of there.
Nobody wants to lose. The number 1 pick doesn't help anyone in the locker room. You know what I mean?
Well, then why'd you bring all those advanced metrics and analytics guys in the front office? You got to get the number 1 pick. Look what people did trading up for those quarterbacks this past season.
And the Browns will feast on the draft picks that they got from trading away their top pick last year.
Yes, the bad results for the house continue. Arizona, another easy win on the road. Rams are awful.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona and a ton of Arizona money. They were bet from -6 to -7.5 over LA. And I mean, it wasn't much of a season finale for the Rams. The first season in LA, and already they got booed off the field. They were ugly. The Rams were just ugly yesterday. And we're just going one after the next. More bad results for the house.
Yeah, and the Chiefs, a lot of Chiefs money. Why in the world do you ever kick the Tyreek Hill?
I don't know. Tyreek Hill has really changed that team. We talk about who can beat New England, Paulie, who can beat New England. And Pittsburgh's going to be a popular choice to beat New England. I think the Chiefs are the team that can go up to Foxborough and get a win. Remember how tough they played them in the playoffs last year. But that being said, Pittsburgh or Kansas City, one of those teams can do it, Paulie. One of those teams can go to Foxborough and come away with a W. It's not going to be Houston with Savage or Osweiler. It's not going to be Miami with Moore. It's not going to be Oakland with McGloin. If the Pats are going down, it's KC or Pittsburgh.
Mab, I'll give you Pittsburgh. I won't give you KC there. Andy Reid's not going to beat Belichick. McGloin, boy, the horrible news with the Raiders. Now McGloin might not be able to go. We could get, and Savage is in the concussion protocol now. We could get Osweiler against Connor Cook in a playoff game.
Yeah, and Connor Cook would be the first quarterback to start a playoff game without starting a regular season game in the entirety of the Super Bowl era. So we're dating back to 1966. Yeah, the situation in Oakland, not good. McGloin got beat up in Denver. And, that was an ugly result for the Raiders in a lot of different ways. As a team, they got physically pounded in that ball game. And now they got to go on the road again next week for their playoff opener.
One great result for the house. Everyone was on Seattle. Everybody. And they couldn't get there. And strange that Carroll pulled Russell Wilson late in that game as well. Black Monday came early. It came early on Sunday. We'll do this more on Tuesday's show. How about all the coaches let go, Teddy?
Yeah, I mean, right now we have the Bills, Chargers, Rams, Jaguars, Broncos, and 49ers all looking for coaches. Chip Kelly, Gary Kubiak, Mike McCoy, all gone as of recording time. Todd Bowles expected back. Bruce Arians expected back. The Jets and Cards aren't going to change. Fox and Chicago expected back. Really, heading into Monday, in business hours on Monday, there's only 2 maybes here. Pagano in Indy, Peyton in New Orleans. Those are the only 2 guys who could leave. And if either one of them left, both could find a new head coaching job immediately. But yeah, we'll talk about some of these coaching hirings and firings and how it's going to affect numbers on Tuesday's show. Not today. Let's wait for the fallout to come through.
All right, Alabama-Clemson rematch. We'll get to that coming up in the deep dive. Up next, big game breakdown, Rose Bowl, Sugar, and an NBA game on SportsBit. Betting insight today on SBRpicks.com.
Go to SBRodds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.
All right, back on SportsBit, Paulie and Teddy, Betting Insight today. We'll get to the UFC as well in the deep dive. We'll close with that before we get out of here. Follow us on Twitter at Paulie Howard, at Teddy_covers. Big game breakdown, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Here we go. Penn State, USC 7, 59.5 the total. Rose Bowl, 2 o'clock Pacific. Suspensions here for Penn State, Teddy.
This is just weird. Rose Bowl on January 2nd, Rose Bowl on a Monday. It's just weird. That being said, let's talk about it. A couple of suspensions, and they're meaningful suspensions for Penn State. They lost a linebacker, Manny Bone. He had 12 starts. He was, one of the top 5 or 6 tacklers on the team. A good player, an impact player. The wide receiver, Saeed Blacknall. He got injured early in the season, but he was a big factor late. In the game against Wisconsin, he was huge. 6 catches, 155 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had touchdown catches of 70 and 40 yards in that ballgame. The good news for Penn State, particularly in terms of the Blacknall suspension, they've got plenty of depth at that position, Paulie.
Some of the best coaching in college football this season was done by these two staffs, which is why there was long shots to get in this game. Remember, USC started 1-3. Helton was on the hot seat. Then they made the quarterback change. They closed 8-0 straight up, 7-1 ATS. And Franklin was on the hot seat too, and he got the signature win against Ohio State, and they rode that momentum the rest of the season.
Yeah, they sure did. But let me get back to the depth at receiver for Penn State. I was trying to hand you an easy one there, buddy. The offensive coordinator, Joe Moorhead, let me give you the quote here, talking about the Blacknall suspension. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but throughout the season, we've lost guys to injury, and particularly at the tackle position. We're very deep at receiver corps. It's a position of strength for us. So the guys that fill in will come in and do an excellent job. Earl Charles, DeAndre Tompkins can play both the inside and outside receiver position. DeAndre plays more the X than the Z, but between DeAndre, Irv, those guys, they'll be able to fill in and do a good job. So Penn State not all that worried in theory about the suspensions. Now you talk about the 2 runs that these teams are on. I mean, you talk about USC, 8-0 straight up, 7-1 at ATS. What about Penn State? Louisville, Florida State. When Louisville killed Florida State, what was it, 63-20? That set up 2 good bets for us from residual all the way months later last week, because LSU was undervalued against Louisville because Louisville was overvalued ever since that win. And on the flip side, it set up Florida State for us against Michigan, where Florida State was undervalued after that game. So we look at Penn State, and remember what happened? They went to Ann Arbor and they got annihilated. What was that? 49-10 in that ball game. Since that time, Wolverines went 2-7 against the spread. Penn State 8-0-1 ATS, 9-0 straight up, the best point spread team in the country this side of Temple over the back half of the campaign. Every bit as good as USC, even better than USC, because USC had the one game where they didn't cover. Penn State only had the one game where they pushed.
How concerned are you that the Big Ten's been awful?
Modestly. And you know, the Big Ten hasn't been awful. Okay?
What?
But
Okay.
they haven't. Northwestern won, Indiana covered, Minnesota won. Okay? The top teams from the Big Ten, the 2 top teams that we've seen, Ohio State was awful. Michigan wasn't awful. They had, Jake Butt got hurt, and Jabril Peppers didn't play, but Michigan
They
never
were
really
thoroughly
sniffed
outplayed in that game.
When they never sniffed a point spread cover, they didn't appear to be lined in the right place, and that definitely worries me about all 3 of the Big Ten teams that are playing today on January 2nd, because those 2 upper echelon teams and part of their success and failures have been measured against the performances, against their games, against the likes of Michigan and Ohio State, who both looked very overvalued over the weekend.
Yes, all right. Number 2, big game breakdown, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Tonight, Sugar Bowl, good game, Auburn, Oklahoma, 5:30 Pacific, Oklahoma 3, 64.5 the total. Oklahoma has the skill players, NFL potential starters, QB, running back, wide receiver. Auburn, the much better defense, and the distraction, the press conference by Mixon. Oklahoma standing behind their original punishment with Mixon after he did the presser when the videotape was released.
Yeah, and I mean, from an Oklahoma standpoint, I agree with the assessment that once you've given a player his discipline, whether that discipline was right or wrong, you're not going to revisit it after the fact. You don't want double jeopardy stuff coming into play. Whether Mixon's original punishment was appropriate or not for us to discuss. What us to discuss is, can Auburn cover the 3-point spread, or is this a spot for Bama to roll? And you talk about the Oklahoma skill position talent. I mean, yeah, not just NFL talent, starters, potential Pro Bowl. When you think about what they bring to the table at the college level, and I know that Auburn defense is pretty good. The Auburn offense wasn't. I mean, Gus Malzahn, who came to Auburn with an offensive juggernaut reputation, obviously he was one of the spread offense gurus. The offense all year was vanilla. They were only effective when they were up against defensive fronts they could push around. And the quarterback play from Sean White, he's mobile. He doesn't throw the football particularly well. So I got my concerns here about Auburn's ability to trade points with an offense like that of the Sooners.
Well, Oklahoma was a hot team at the end of the season, but those 2 early losses kept them out of the playoff. They gave up 30 points per game, leaky defense, but you see all the star players they have on offense. Mayfield's monster numbers. Westbrook had 74 catches for 1,500 yards. All 16 of his touchdowns came in the last 9 games, and we've talked about P. Ryan and Mixon all the time here on Sports, but this entire season, how dangerous they are.
They are. But, I mean, in general, both this year and in bowls past, the finesse teams don't do particularly well. And the good defensive teams like Auburn tend to do pretty well. I mean, Auburn, that's a really athletic defense. They have speed. They have depth. They only give up 17 points per game versus FBS foes. But, Oklahoma's not a finesse team. Don't think that for a minute. They will pound you up front. So while some of the finesse teams haven't had real good bowls, I'm not looking at Oklahoma in that department at all. And Auburn has no chance if Oklahoma gets a lead. I mean, I know that Tiger defense is leaky. Yeah, they give up 30 points a game against some of those Big 12 offenses. But Auburn doesn't score 30 these days. They haven't. We'll get back to this game when it comes to play of the daytime.
All right, one more. LiveOddsSportsBookReview.com and the Association. Hornets and the Bulls pick 203 the total. If you've been following SportsBit, we told you about Rondo. His days could be numbered in Chicago. Benched for the second half of the loss at Indiana on Friday afternoon. Didn't play at all in the home loss to Milwaukee. Chemistry a mess. Well, I didn't like Hoiberg to begin with. 8 double-digit losses in their last 16 games. 5-11 straight up in 3-13 ATS. Hoiberg on the hot seat.
Yeah, okay, there's so much to talk about here, but let's start with the numbers. 5-11 straight up in their last 16 games. They're supposed to be a playoff team. 3-13 against the spread. They have been burning money for their backers, and they have 8 double-digit losses during that span. So games where they're not even competitive by the end of the fourth quarter. There are clearly chemistry issues with Chicago. I'm going to say I was wrong. I thought Rondo might do all right. Everybody was like, Rondo. He's going to be awful in Chicago. You can't like Rondo in Chicago. I'm like, no, I'm going to try to like him. I was wrong. Rondo, what did he shoot? Under 37% from the floor. Didn't play a whole lot of defense. How about this? His player efficiency rating among NBA point guards, number 46. So, he got benched in the second half against Indiana. Didn't play at all against Milwaukee on Saturday. And who knows what's going to happen with Rondo moving forward. I know they will aggressively try to move him. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of spots for Rajon Rondo at this stage of the campaign.
No, I'm with you. And I'll tell you, with the Hornets, they can score, man. They're doing an excellent job this season.
Yeah, let me just go back to the Rondo quotes. Quote, no, I'm not surprised. It's been a tough season. Certain buttons are being pushed, and the Bulls are trying to figure things out. I'm going to continue to work, get some work in, play some one-on-one, take care of my body, lift, and give these young guys as much advice while I'm on the bench. So Rondo's saying the right thing. So is Hoiberg. Quote, he was very professional about it. Again, talked about doing whatever he can to help the team. I think that is very admirable for a guy that's had the type of career that he has had. I wonder if that's a Freudian slip there for Hoiberg, talking about Rondo's career in the past tense instead of is having. But you talk about Kemba Walker and the matchup against Chicago. If you're having problems with the point guard position, you don't want to be going up against Kemba Walker right now. He's number 10 in player efficiency rating. And frankly, when it comes down to his intangibles, tight game on the line, I want the ball in Kemba Walker's hands, no problem. And the Hornets, they already have 9 road wins. That could have been better. 2 of the road losses have come in overtime.
Up next, the deep dive. We'll get to the rematch, Alabama and Clemson, and recap what happened in a wild weekend with the Bulls and a UFC recap on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
That's right, the 8th annual SBR Forum Bash will be held at the breathtaking all-inclusive Hard Rock Hotel in Punta Cana on Super Bowl weekend. Join Natalie Rydstrom and the Odds Couple as they mingle with SBR pros and have fun under the sun. Stay tuned for video coverage of Bash activities, including a $5,000 poker tournament sponsored by uwager.eu. Only on SBR, your sportsbook authority since 1999.
All right, wrapping it up on SportsBit, Betting Insight today, Paulie and Teddy. College football coming up in a second, and a quick UFC recap. We almost forgot one of the worst beats of the NFL season, and it was also bad for the books. The Sunday night game, bet from 48.5 or 40.5 to 50.5. I don't know. At the end, I can't explain what happened with the timeouts, what Green Bay was doing, and Detroit scores with one play left as Stafford throws a touchdown to make it 31-24, which was 7-7 at the 2-minute warning to the first half.
Yeah, tough beat if you had the under in that ball game. Real tough, and obviously not another bad result for the house. We talked about so many of them earlier in the show. I don't know how we left this one out. And you say one of the worst beats of the season. It might well have been because this game was over. But Caldwell called timeout, and McCarthy called timeout, which allowed the clock to save just enough. And then the punt was shanked, and then Stafford took advantage. No pressure, just one play. Game goes over the total. Ouch for everyone involved in that one. Congrats if you cash that over ticket.
Stafford throws it up for grabs. He's rewarded, and Bettors rewarded as well. A vicious beat if you had the under. All right, to college football. How about Saturday where a lot of support for both dogs? Both games, Teddy, over at halftime.
Yeah, I mean, the line on Alabama dropped as low as -12.5 at some spots against Washington. The wise guys loved the Huskies in that one. Clemson went off as a 1-point favorite in a couple of key spots. Remember, Ohio State was -3, -3.5. It was all Clemson money. And, of course, the first lines out of the gate for the title game, and the first book posted, Canner Technology here in Nevada. The first line they hung was Alabama -8. That quickly down to 6.5, where it is across the markets right now. The closing line when these two teams met in the national title game last year, Alabama -6.5, exactly where it is for the rematch.
We talked about this on Friday's show. We love Venables and the job he's done as defensive coordinator. Did he earn his money or what? I mean, they dominated the line of scrimmage. Ohio State, Urban Meyer shut out for the first time. Come on.
And Urban Meyer with extra time to prepare. You know, the guy has been a point spread machine in that role. I mean, quite literally. But, I mean, look at Ohio State's production. This graphic will show you. Let's see, they had 9 first downs, 7 punts, 3 turnovers, 0 points with their senior Heisman contending QB. Dominating performance from that Clemson defense. And considering the struggles that Alabama had moving the football against Washington, maybe that's a concern for the Crimson Tide, although I think the Crimson Tide might have a better game in them than the one that we just saw.
I would say. The play calling in that Washington game was a horror show. Why Washington didn't run the ball to get to halftime. You could see the pick six coming, and I know Saban was chewing out Kiffin. They kept throwing the ball on first down, and they couldn't stop Scarborough in the run. I mean, Hurts was 7 of 14 for 57 yards in the game.
Yeah, now look, those college football semis, that were not really what the books were hoping for. I mean, the Squares played Bama. Everybody played Clemson. Neither was a great result for most books here in Las Vegas, although the books that catered to wise guys did okay. You know, there was buyback on the Buckeyes. There was loads of Huskies support. But we got to talk, it's still dogs, man. Dogs 25-12 in bowl season, and that tends to be very good for sports books, both here in Las Vegas and offshore.
Yeah, got to talk about the toughest bad beat of the weekend in college. It was the Stanford-North Carolina game. Stanford, too many times they had to settle for field goals, couldn't punch it in the red zone. They lose their quarterback, obviously no McCaffrey, and then Trubisky, who they harassed all game long, goes 97 yards, and then they go for 2 to tie it up. They sack him, 2-point win.
Yeah, I mean, and of course they're laying 2.5. Remember, Stanford laying 2.5 against North Carolina. And I mean, the Cardinals dominated that game. They really did, but they went 0 for 5 in the red zone. They had a 1st and goal from the 1 against North Carolina and couldn't punch it in. And when that happens, you know, you don't cover. But they also, there was a situation we're telling you that they weren't going to miss McCaffrey. And they didn't miss McCaffrey that much, except for on one play when Stanford was trying to run out the clock. McCaffrey, with enough experience, he wouldn't have run out of bounds. Love did. That allowed the Tar Heels to save that one timeout. But frankly, I didn't know if they needed it. Trubisky found it. I mean, the whole game he had no rhythm. And then 97 yards in a minute with the one timeout. I honestly think if they didn't have the timeout, it might not have mattered. But if you had Stanford at that point, you're like, you got to make the 2. Please make the 2. We can go to overtime. I can still cover this game. We have the better defense. Didn't happen. Tough beat. I don't know if that was the toughest beat of the weekend. That was the toughest bowl beat of the weekend. That was not the toughest beat overall of the weekend. That might have been, I don't know. What do we want to call it? You're going to call it the Falcons? You're going to call it Lions Packers under.
Oh, Lions, yeah. With Atlanta close second, but that Lions Packers total, unbelievable. I can't believe this. I talked to Nick Bogdanovich on my radio show from William Hill, director of trading, and also you see some other books. They either made money or broke even in the UFC card because there was a ton of Rousey money late.
Yeah, I mean, here's a tweet from Matthew Holt. Holt from Canner CG Technology. Quote, the book broke about even on UFC 207 despite only winning money on 2 of the 9 fights, thanks to a huge influx of Rousey money. Who was betting her, Paulie? Didn't make any sense.
I don't know. Well, I know there were some people saying, "Come on, she's never been under than below a $5 favorite before in her career." But I mean, you could see it with what happened with the layoff. $3 million for 48 seconds. That was a debacle. It was amazing. Oh, come on.
Would you get your ass kicked like that for 48 seconds for $3 million?
Oh, sure, yeah. I'll go in there with Tyson. Come on.
I wouldn't even think about it. Exactly.
All right, it was an excellent week with the picks. We are 45-24 on the football season. Money time, play of the day, back to the Sugar Bowl. As you mentioned earlier, Teddy, what are we doing?
Let's go with team number 282, betting number 282. Boomer Sooner, Oklahoma minus the 3 tonight. D.D. Westbrook, 74 catches, 19.8 yards per completion, 16 touchdowns. Here's a Heisman wide receiver who didn't get quite as many touches as he deserved because of the Oklahoma ground game. Through the air, on the ground. Sooners can move the ball. Auburn can't. Lay the points. Oklahoma minus the 3.
Yes, excellent. Great show coming up tomorrow. Jimmy Vaccaro in the deep dive. Early look at Alabama Clemson. Plus, we'll get to all the coaches gone in the NFL. We'll do more on that. And also, we have our lines for the playoffs in the NFL. And Teddy has got a great stat coming up Wednesday on what to do in the wild card round. That's coming up Tuesday and Wednesday on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.